Hello, this is Tommy Franks. Welcome to the 4-Star Leadership Podcast, product of the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and Museum. We're here to get a view into the lives of the legacy makers, the movers, and the shakers of today. Offer insights from the full spectrum of the leadership community. We'll talk to former 4-star students and explore their leadership development path. We'll work to find out what they are about today and learn from the opportunities they've made for themselves in this world. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this podcast. Remember, leaders are not born, they're developed.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Core Principles of Leadership with General Tommy Franks. I'm your host, Dr. Jill Green. We are on episode 31, and today as our guest, we have an actor, director, musician, and humanitarian, Gary Sinise. He is best known for his roles in the award-winning movies Forrest Gump, Apollo 13, Ransom, Of Mice and Men, Truman, George Wallace, and The Green Mile, and the hit TV shows CSI New York and Criminal Minds Beyond Borders. Gary has won an Emmy Award, a Golden Globe Award, and has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and has been nominated for an Oscar. He founded the Gary Sinise Foundation, which serves and honors America's defenders, veterans, first responders, their families, and those in need. He's the leader and bass player for the Lieutenant Dan Band, which has entertained more than 500,000 troops around the world. He is co-founder of the prestigious Steppenwolf Theater Company in Chicago. Gary has been presented with many awards, including the Spirit of Hope Award by the Department of Defense. He was named an honorary Chief Petty Officer by the United States Navy, was penned an honorary Marine, and received the Sylvanus Thayer Award at West Point, given to a civilian whose character, service, and achievement reflect the ideals prized by the United States Military Academy. He's a recipient of the Presidential Citizens Medal, the second highest civilian honor award to citizens for exemplary deeds performed in service of this nation. We'll be talking to this grateful American about growing up in a Chicago suburb, forming the Steppenwolf Theater Company as a way to continue acting after graduating high school, and how long before portraying the iconic role of Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, he had the deep respect and connection to those who serve this great country, and how he gave back to the community, and why he is now considered one of the greatest humanitarians of our lifetime. Before we get started in our program, we'll have a word from our major sponsor, REI Oklahoma. REI Oklahoma is proud to be part of the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and Museum in the production and distribution of these podcasts designed to inspire leaders and difference makers. At REI Oklahoma, we have been working with small business leaders, entrepreneurs, and people who are driven to succeed for years. Highly motivated people working to own their own businesses, live in their own homes, and make the world a better place since its beginning. REI Oklahoma has continued to identify hurdles and deliver holistic solutions to create job growth and help neighborhoods thrive in both rural and urban communities. REI Oklahoma looks forward to visiting with you about helping your business and community grow. Visiting reiok.org or call 1-800-658-2823 to start the conversation.
The LaBarre family is a fourth-generation Oklahoma family. That may not sound like a long time, but our grandfathers were born here, within the Comanche Nation, before the land grants. We are the proudest sponsor of the Tommy Franks 4-Star Leadership Podcast. We hope listeners will heed the words of these distinguished men and women who have served our country at the highest levels and across all walks of life.
All right. Today, I'm honored to have with us a very special guest who General Franks refers to as a great patriot, Mr. Gary Sinise. I'm grateful that you could be with us today. This is a very special podcast. We recently wrapped up our most recent 4-star leadership program, and we left each of our young leaders with a goal of understanding community understanding, which is a project that we've left them with the goal of creating in their communities that would create change, create a better community. So having one of the world's most selfless servant leaders as a guest today, I hope will be inspiring to all our young leaders to know that grassroots efforts can really snowball and grow into something massive change. All it takes is determination, grit, and perseverance, and Mr. Sinise's character is built around each of those qualities. So thanks for joining us today, Mr. Sinise. So tell us a little bit about yourself and growing up in Chicago.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Please give my best to General Franks. He's a great man. A lot of great memories from way back when. I met him 20 years ago, so it's a while. I grew up in Chicago, in the Chicago area. I was born on the south side of Chicago. My grandfather worked on the railroad there on the south side, the Indiana Beltline, Harbor Belt Line Railroad, and then he had three sons. Two were he served in the Army in World War I, and he was an ambulance driver in France during the Battle of the Argonne, and he had three sons. Married my grandmother. He met her at an Army base in northern Illinois when he got back, and they had three sons. My Uncle Jack was the oldest. He served in World War II as a navigator on a B-17 bomber over Europe. And then the middle son, my Uncle Jerry, he served on a ship in the Pacific he was a part of the invasions of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. And then my dad was the youngest of the three. He served in the Navy from 1951 to 1955. And he didn't go overseas. This was during Korea, but one of his jobs was he actually, at one point, he was in Jacksonville, Florida, and he was training. He had gone to Great Lakes Naval Base for boot camp in 1951, and then he went to Jacksonville, Florida for more training. And they asked him if he wanted to be on a ship or if he wanted to take pictures if he wanted to have a camera and be part of the photo school. So he took the camera and they shipped him off to Pensacola, Florida to the photo school there. He became a photo mate and ended up serving his time in Washington, D.C. At Anacostia Bowling there. And part of my dad did was process film that was coming back from the battlefront in Korea. And then he had top secret clearance, and he would take it over to the Pentagon, and they would, and the leadership would review the footage that was coming back from Korea. So that my dad learned the film business in the Navy and ended up going into the film business when he got out of the Navy in 1955. I was born about 10 days before he got out of the Navy. My mom was in Washington, D.C. with him and said, I'm not going to have the baby here. I want to have the baby at home. So she went back to Chicago. That's where I was born on March 17th, 1955. My dad got out of the Navy about 10 days later. So I guess I'm a Navy brat by about 10
yeah,
days.
You can hold that title.
Yeah, so General Franks, I'm a Navy brat. Yes.
There's probably some benefits in there somewhere for you.
I just snuck in by about 10 days.
So you have your roots. Your dad was in the film business, and so as you're growing up, you're a kid like most of us. You kind of, it's kind of really no direction. And tell us about how you got into the film and theater world.
Yeah, so we lived on the South Side until I was born in 55. So we lived on the South Side till about, I think it was 1963 or 64. I remember I was about 9 years old when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and I was going to school, I think third grade at that time, on the South Side of Chicago. And then we moved to a northern suburb called Highland Park, Illinois. And you may actually recall Highland Park was in the news last year on July 4th when there was a terrible shooting there at the 4th of July parade. I was actually in that parade when I was a kid, and so it really hit home. But I went to fourth grade there, and then I started playing music and got into music and started playing in bands and all of that. And then I was in high school in Highland Park, and I was playing in a band and standing in a hallway at one point with some of the band members looking pretty, rock and rolls, scraggly looking. And the drama teacher walked down the hall and told us we should come and audition for West Side Story because she was directing the spring musical. It was going to be West Side Story. And if you know West Side Story, it's about the two gangs and they fight on stage and everything. She said we looked like gang members, so we should come and audition. So I actually went to the audition. I thought it'd be kind of fun. I saw all the pretty girls walking in there, and I followed them in, ended up auditioning for the play. I got a little part in it, and that changed my whole life. I mean, I was a struggling student from kindergarten up all the way through high school, and struggled, really not doing well at all, really trying to find my way and all of that. Music was the thing, as I said, that kept me going, but I was failing all my classes and whatnot. And then I auditioned for this play. I got in the play, and it really changed my life. All of a sudden, I found this thing that I was pretty good at. I fell in love with it. I wanted to do it more and more. So I took all the theater classes after that. And all of a sudden, I started getting A's, like really high marks in theater class, and I'd never gotten A's before in a maybe gym class or something like that. But I, just never succeeded in that way. But all of a sudden, I was doing really well in these theater classes, and I was auditioning for all the plays, and I was getting in the plays and doing multiple plays. Met some cool folks. One of which is his name's Jeff Perry, and Jeff. We became best pals in high school and did a lot of plays together. And then we went on after high school and started a theater company called Steppenwolf Theater when I was 18 years old. And Steppenwolf now has been around almost 50 years. It's a multi-million-dollar building with 3 theaters, a gigantic gazillion-dollar budget, international reputation. A lot of great actors have come out of there. And it started with a couple of kids who just wanted to do plays. And we didn't have any money or anything. Now it's a gigantic building. It really is a great American theater story where you just start with a passion and you pursue it. And we have the freedom to do that. And you try your best. You work really hard. Now, if you go to Chicago and you want to go to Steppenwolf, you can go there and you can see this massive building, gigantic building with 3 theaters in there. There's restaurants in there. There's bars. There's, museums. And I mean, it's a giant space. And it all started with a couple of 18-year-old kids just wanted to do plays. And that passion for doing that started in high school. And of course, I went on and did a lot of things after Steppenwolf in the movie and television business. And, if you discover something at a young age like that you end up following this kind of dream you follow and you end up making a living at it. And It's really a blessing. So many people search and search and search, but I found this thing when I was a kid and just wanted to do it all the time, and was able to make a living at it.
Well, and that's one thing we tell our students, find something that you're passionate about, something that you love to go to work for. Your life will just become so mundane if you're going and doing something that is you're not passionate about. So when you're young and you guys have started Steppenwolf in its infancy, you guys kind of had the forethoughts of making it a nonprofit, very early on. And so, when I was reading your book, I was kind of thinking about, those community leaders that really stepped up and helped, you guys, and, gave you some, a boost. And, that's one of the core principles that we teach, is that common vision. So when you're that young and you and your buddies are, out in your community trying to rally, people to your mission, and how did you persevere and push on? And because I'm sure that you had people tell you, no, this is crazy.
Oh,
So
God.
how did you guys persevere and move on and, have that determination not to give up?
There's a lot of effort that goes into it, obviously, to make something successful, and you have to pursue it, and you have to push through all those obstacles. But there's also a little bit of luck too, like we just happened, and we were a bunch of kids that started with just wanting to do a play, and I had graduated high school one semester late after my class. So Jeff Perry and I were classmates, and he went off to college, and I had to go back to high school because I didn't have enough credits to graduate. I was just such a bad student. So I wanted to get my diploma and everything. So I went back to high school. I was kind of depressed, but I did another play, and it was great. But then I graduated in mid-year, right? Usually you graduate around May or June, something like that. That's the end of the school year. I graduated in January the following year after my class had graduated in June. So I wanted to continue doing plays. And so me and a couple of high school students said, let's find a space and let's pick a play and let's do it. And we did. My parents actually knew the architects of a local church that was kind of had this big open space. And I asked them if we could use it to put on a play, and they said, sure. They gave us a key and let us go in there at night and rehearse our play. I was obviously, at that point, I had graduated from high school, so I was actually working for my dad. He as like just a runner, very, very little money, but my dad had his own editing business in Chicago. And I would take the train downtown and work in the day and then go home. And then we'd go to rehearsal at night and work on this play. That began Steppenwolf Theater, those initial moments back in February or March of 1974. And we named it Steppenwolf at that point. We started asking everybody's parents, to give us like their old clothes so we could make costumes, and give us their old furniture so we could make sets. And, the parents started to see the kids doing their little play, and that was kind of cute. And so let's help it and support it. Well, we just kept that going for a while. And then we eventually ended up with kind of a new group of kids. It was me, Jeff Perry, and a guy named Terry Kinney, who were the three founders of Steppenwolf. Terry and Jeff were going to college, and I had gotten this theater company going back in Highland Park, Illinois. We found a little space that we could actually build a theater in that wasn't a church or anything. It was the basement of a closed-down Catholic school. And it was a big open space. The school was closed. They weren't doing anything with it. And we asked them if we could build a little theater in there. So we put up risers, and we created a little 3/4 round space. We put these risers together. So you had a row on the main floor and then 2 more rows of risers. And there were 88 seats in this little basement, Catholic school basement theater that we built. And that was the first home of Steppenwolf when we opened in the summer of 1976 with 4 one-act plays. And it was me, Jeff, and Terry, and then 6 of their classmates from Illinois State University. Classmates that included John Malkovich, Laurie Metcalf, and others who, my wife, Moira, we fell in love back in 1976, and we got married in 81. Been married ever since, and she was an early member of Steppenwolf. So there were 9 of us in this basement of a Catholic school doing plays. And so the parents and the community started to support us. We started spreading the word that we had a theater company in there. We charged maybe $3 for tickets to come and see our plays in the basement. Everybody in the company worked other jobs during the day to support ourselves. I worked on the loading dock at Neiman Marcus. There was a local Neiman Marcus, and I unloaded boxes off the trucks and then unpacked the merchandise and sent it in there. That was my day job. And then we would go to the theater at night and work on our plays at night and go back to work the next day. So we had a passionate dream. It was really like we wanted to act, and that was it. And that's what drove us. We were willing to do whatever we could to pursue our dream, and it turned into a giant building in Chicago.
That's crazy. So that's what perseverance is. So that's what we're trying to teach our students. So your acting career, over your career, you've played some really important historical characters in their biopics, and you've brought novels to life on the screen. But there's that one character that, it's kind of an importance in our pop culture that most people probably know you by, and that's Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump. So when you're filming that movie, did you realize while you're filming the impact that role would have on our culture and you as a person?
No, of course not. I was really enjoying playing the part. I had Vietnam veterans in my family. I'm playing a Vietnam veteran. I had actually gotten involved with supporting Vietnam veterans back 10 years prior to playing the Vietnam veteran in Forrest Gump. So there was a passionate drive to play that character in the right way. Because of the personal relationships that I had with so many veterans going back into the early 80s. And I wanted to represent them, in the most honest way. So I studied pretty hard to play the double amputee. I studied very hard to play the soldier. I wanted to be a convincing soldier, and so we lived in the woods and did boot camp and, all that kind of stuff. And I had a good guy who was training the platoon in Forrest Gump to be soldiers. His name is Dale Dye, and he was a Marine in Vietnam, and he fell into he ended up working in the 80s with Oliver Stone on the movie Platoon, and he trained the guys in Platoon to be soldiers and to be a unit in that movie. And from that, he just started getting hired to train soldiers and, service members for movies about war. And so when Forrest Gump came along, he got hired to train us and to put us through a boot camp, which was very, very helpful to me to play the soldier, I thought. Because I went out and lived in the woods, and I learned how to be the lieutenant. I learned how to be, create a pretty good impression there as a leader of a platoon. And I very much wanted to do everything possible to be a convincing lieutenant in that movie, and then also convincing as a wounded soldier, double amputee. So I studied, pretty hard. And there was a book I read at the time by a Vietnam veteran, or written by a Vietnam veteran who actually was the son of one of probably the most decorated Marine officer ever, Chesty Puller. And his son, Lewis Puller, wrote a book about his experiences in Vietnam called Fortunate Son. And he had been blown up, lost his legs, and very severely wounded in Vietnam. And I read his book, Fortunate Son, while I was making that movie. And that was very helpful to just the insight of, getting into the mindset of somebody who, he was following in the footsteps of the most well-known and well-respected Marine officer ever, his dad was Chesty Puller. Well, in Forrest Gump, you see, if you remember, he's following in a line of all these military people, going back to the Revolutionary War, and then the Civil War, and then World War I, and then World War II. Great military history in Lieutenant Dan's family. So he wants to live up to that, and then he gets blown up. Very similar to what Lewis Puller went through. So reading that was very helpful to me, and working with Dale Dye was very helpful to me. Did we know that it was going to turn out to be as popular a film as it was? No, you couldn't really know that at the time, or that I, as Lieutenant Dan, would be recognized, by the military community and by the veteran community in that way. I couldn't have predicted that. All I knew was that my wife's two brothers and her sister's husband had all served in Vietnam. I had great respect for them and wanted to honor their service. In fact, my brother-in-law, Jack, who was a combat medic in Vietnam, he had dog tags. I tell this story in my book where I actually, in the movie, you'll see Lieutenant Dan wearing, his dog tags. Those are my brother-in-laws from Vietnam.
Wow.
Yeah, I wore Jack's dog tags in the movie. I always thought that my wife's older brother, Lieutenant Colonel Boyd McKenna Harris, he was a West Pointer, 2 tours in Vietnam, served as a platoon leader and then a company commander. He passed away, unfortunately, in 1983 of cancer, but the short time that I knew him, I was just blown away by him and totally impressed by his ability as an officer. He would have gone on. He's Tommy Franks' age, right? They are the same age. And I remember talking to General Franks about this. I have no doubt that like General Franks, my brother-in-law Mac would have gone on and got his 4-star and been a great military leader. He was on his way. He was lieutenant colonel when he passed away. But he wrote in 1983, the final thing that he did was rewrite the leadership manual for the Army. It was actually published just after he passed away, but he finished it. We have recently packed up a bunch of stuff because we're moving, but I keep that right on my shelf all the time. And there are great principles in there that they still teach at West Point. They give awards at West Point in my brother-in-law's name, an Excellence in Leadership Award. And then also at Fort Leavenworth, he was inducted in 2016 into the Fort Leavenworth Hall of Fame, along with Hal Moore, who was still living at the time. They give each year at Leavenworth, they'll give somebody who has passed, they'll induct them into the Hall of Fame, and somebody who is living. And Hal Moore and my brother-in-law Mac Harris were both inducted in 2016. So he was a very influential person, very strong. And I always thought that the leadership aspect of Lieutenant Dan in the movie, that I was kind of basing it on what I had seen and observed from my wife's brother, Mac. Could I have predicted that Lieutenant Dan would have gone on and played a bigger role in my life than just a part I was playing in a movie. No, I couldn't have at the time, but I do look at Lieutenant Dan as having opened many, many doors to the military and veteran community. And still today, it's just one of those movies that's on all the time, and one of those characters that people seem to really respect.
They resonate to it. And I think that's because, you played it and you took it so personally, and you wanted to, convey what it was like for a veteran. So for that, as from the military standard and community, I appreciate that. So, so at what point after you've played Lieutenant Dan, do you really come to the understanding that, wow, this is the direction my life is going?
Well, you said you read my book,
yes.
Grateful American. So you'll recall that the first page of my book describes a moment at the Disabled American Veterans Convention in 1994, about 6 weeks after Forrest Gump had come out. It opened on July 6, 1994. And about 6 weeks later, I found myself having been invited to Chicago to attend the Disabled American Veterans Convention. And I didn't know what the Disabled American Veterans were at that time until they approached me and said they wanted to present me at their convention with their National Commanders Award for playing a wounded Vietnam veteran in a way that they thought was motivational and very positive. And if you look at the story of Lieutenant Dan, it is a positive story. Back then, in the late 70s, 80s, into the 90s, if you look at the movies that were made at that time about the Vietnam experience, and I've talked about this before, prior to Forrest Gump, the characters, the Vietnam veterans portrayed in films, it was they placed a heavy emphasis on the veteran that was just not doing very well, right? If you look at Platoon, the end of Platoon, Charlie Sheen is flying out of the helicopter in a helicopter, and he's looking at the battlefield, and there's nothing but bodies everywhere. And you just think that guy's going to have a really hard time coming home from that war. Well, that was a lot of what we were seeing. It's not an untrue experience. I mean, a lot of Vietnam veterans came back and they had difficulties dealing with things. My brother-in-law, Arthur, who was the younger brother of the two brothers, he was a helicopter pilot, and he was like that. He had a lot of trouble dealing with things after the war. But if you look at Coming Home, the movie Coming Home, the veterans are just not doing so great at the end of that movie. Casualties of War, not so good. Apocalypse Now, difficult stuff. And Deer Hunter, trouble. And we, until Forrest Gump, we hadn't really seen a Vietnam veteran portrayed in a film who actually turns a corner. If you look at the story of Lieutenant Dan, he's successful in business at the end of the movie. He's moving on. Him and Forrest Gump are doing okay. Lieutenant Dan is married at the end of the movie. He's wealthy. He's a wealthy businessman. We hadn't seen a Vietnam veteran story like that until Forrest Gump. And so that was kind of it was a little bit different moment, I think, and something that really connected to veterans. And so the Disabled American Veteran Organization invited me to come, and they presented me with their National Commanders Award, which for playing a character who does okay, yeah, who's a Vietnam veteran. And that really solidified some things for me back in the 90s. That started me on, like I said, I had been involved with supporting Vietnam veterans prior to that. And certainly all that played into my passionate desire to get that part and to play that part. But 10 years later, going to that convention and seeing 2,000 wounded veterans in the audience in the ballroom applauding me for playing a wounded veteran, that was galvanizing in a way that that's 30 years ago, and I haven't stopped.
Well, and at that convention they mostly would have been Vietnam veterans, because at that time, in that era we hadn't had our most current wars. So those.
Yeah, Vietnam veterans, World War II veterans, Korea era veterans, Gulf War veterans were there. This was 1994.
Right. So very little. And I don't want to say that nothing was done for our veterans back then, but it wasn't a priority as you see today. So I think that maybe you and your role and the way you portrayed it was probably a lot to do with how our society sees veterans. So,
well, all of that was a real motivator for me. Having Vietnam veterans in my family, remembering what it was like, the struggles and the difficulties that they had coming home, having personal relationships with Vietnam veterans and friends, meeting so many through the Disabled American Veterans organization. All of that was a motivator for me after September 11th to get involved, in supporting the men and women who were deploying in reaction to that event on 9/11. And I very much, and I've said this multiple times, I didn't want to see our Afghanistan and Iraq veterans come home to a nation that wasn't appreciative of them in the way that our Vietnam veterans came home. And I learned a lot from our Vietnam veterans, and it was a real mission for me to go out there and to go to the war zones and to go to the hospitals and to get involved with multiple nonprofits that were supporting veterans to try to ensure that they would know that they were appreciated. And somebody who's in the movie business showing up in a hospital or in the war zone, shaking hands and taking pictures, that can brighten somebody's day and make them feel pretty good.
So we all remember 9/11. So at that time, I was a stay-at-home mom, and my husband, we were stationed at Fort Polk. I can remember waking up that morning, and I had just turned on the television at the exact moment that the second plane hit the tower. And I didn't know, so I changed the channel, and it was on all of the televisions. So, and then my husband had left early that morning to go to a training exercise off base somewhere. And so by the end of the day, we had tanks and individuals and razor wire at all the entrances to our cul-de-sacs. The base was closed for 3 days. I couldn't get off. My husband couldn't get on. So at that point, with our connection to the military, we knew that our world had, shifted and changed forever. So when you look back, and we knew that our lives were never going to be the same. So how did that day affect your life?
Yeah, significant event. In fact, today, I just did an interview about 2 hours ago with a radio station in New York. Today, my foundation, we are, educating our young people and our public as to the cost of freedom and the price paid for it, and not only that we should support our defenders, but why we should do that. That's a big part of my foundation. I made education a part of the mission statement early on. And today we have a group of high school students that we are funding at the 9/11 Museum and Memorial in New York City. And these are all kids that they don't have any recollection of what happened. They weren't even born. So, now we have generations of young people that don't have any.
There's no connection. Yeah.
Don't have any personal connection to that at all. So, of course, much like Pearl Harbor for us, I wasn't alive then. But passing on that history is critically important because it's, the events of a day like that, December 7th, 1940, 41 is, and 9/11. These are significant days that have impacted all of us in the United States and around the world. So students learning about that as much firsthand as they possibly can from the people that lived through those things, that's very impactful and very important. There's a chapter in my book, Grateful American. It's the September 11th chapter. And the chapter, I titled it Turning Point. Because up until that chapter, I'm kind of setting the stage a little bit for what would happen after that day. And the significance of that day and the role, the impact that made on me and how it changed the course of my life. As I said, in the 80s, I got involved with supporting Vietnam veterans. I have veterans in my family, on my side of the family, my wife's side of the family. Forrest Gump, the Vietnam veteran, disabled American veteran stuff in the 90s. All that was a precursor. It was like teeing up something that would manifest into a mission of service that would happen after that terrible day of 9/11, 2001. And that really took it changed the course of my life significantly, and I went full on into service.
Let's pause for just a moment for a word from one of our generous sponsors. Hello, this is Dr. Jill Green with the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and Museum. I would like to tell you about one of our partner sponsors, Justin Krieger. He has worked as an independent insurance agent at Krieger Insurance Agency in his hometown of Hobart, Oklahoma since 1999. Justin is honored to help with our annual Celebration of Freedom event and has served on the board of directors for the General Tommy Franks Leadership Institute and Museum for many years. He is a fifth-generation farmer and rancher in Kiowa County, where cattle, crops, and even insurance is sold with a handshake. Give him a call at 580-726-3076 or come by the office and speak with Justin or Kathy Langford about your insurance needs. Krieger Insurance is thankful for their loyal customers and friends who have supported them through the years and look forward to earning your business as well. Justin feels honored to live in such a great country, and he is proud to be a sponsor of the Core Principles of Leadership podcasts. Please enjoy the rest of this podcast experience brought to you by your friends at Krieger Insurance Agency. Now let's get back to this great episode. When we have our 4-star students here with us in Oklahoma, we take them to the Oklahoma City bombing memorial. And the sad thing about it is a lot of those students have it's not that they weren't even around for it, because they weren't, but they've never even heard of what happened in Oklahoma on April 19th, 1995. So we think it's important for us to take them to the memorial and have them speak to a survivor. And we want to show them, what one man's hate and ugliness can, turn tragedy into. But then at the same time, how, a community comes together and really turns that triumph, turns a tragedy into a triumph. And, by, trying to, come together as, because we're all from different cultures and backgrounds and beliefs. But that doesn't mean that, we can't just get along. That, that's what America is about. It would be so boring if we were all just the same here. So, but we take them so that we can show them. And, that horrific event, much like 9/11, just to a smaller scale, it was a time, all across America that everyone wanted to do something. The patriotism was, at its all-time high. Flags were sold out. You couldn't find a flag in a store or online. And, but slowly, after, 9/11, Americans just kind of went back into their daily routines and, started just living their lives again. But to you, you didn't. That's kind of when your mission changed. And can you tell us about what it was like to embrace that new path that your life was on?
Yeah, could I have known that it would turn into what it's turned into at the time? No. I mean, it wasn't like I planned at that moment or within those, those first months after September 11th. Well, here's what I'm going to do with my life now. And, when I'm 75 years old, I'm going to have done all this stuff and gone all over the place and done all these things, to serve our service members and everything. I couldn't have envisioned that. It wasn't a master plan or anything. It was one small step and then another step and then another step. And I've told this story before, that week of September 11th was that first week, and those initial days and months were so profound and impactful and emotional, and gut-wrenching and heartbreaking and all of that. And my heart was breaking. I was afraid. We all were kind of paranoid back then, remember? I mean, it was like, holy cow, is there going to be another attack? I've talked about this. You'll remember that within days of the September 11th attack, all of a sudden people are opening their mail and there's anthrax in the mail and all this stuff. And people died from anthrax being passed around in the mail. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, the terrorists are on the march. They're on the attack. I mean, it turned out it wasn't, the anthrax wasn't the, Islamic terrorism at play there, but it made you think how easy it would be for a terrorist to just come across the southern border with a backpack full of that stuff and just dump it on the White House lawn, and all of a sudden it's blowing all over the place. You just start, I remember creating these scenarios of terror in my head, and my heart was breaking, and I've got little kids at that time. My little daughter was, I think my youngest was about 9 at the time. And I remember the Friday after September 11th was a Tuesday. And then a few days later was President Bush had stated that day would be the National Day of Prayer and Remembrance for the victims of 9/11. And all across the country, every church and synagogue, I mean, every house of worship in the country was packed to the gills on that day. And I remember going to our little Catholic church. I write about this in my book. And there were no seats. All the pews were filled, and I was standing up against the wall holding my little daughter's hand, and tears were streaming down my face. And at the end, we sang "God Bless America," and tears were just streaming down my face. And then I went to a candlelight vigil that night and was standing there holding this American flag up over my head. And the whole corner was just filled with people with candles, and they were all singing. And saying the Pledge of Allegiance and all of this stuff, and I'm holding the flag up, and I was so profoundly moved and heartbroken by that event that I needed to do something. I just needed to take action. I needed to figure out how to deal with the fear and the concern and the concern for my own family. What country are my kids going to grow up in now? What kind of world is it now? And then just a month later, General Franks and our gang started heading overseas to deal with it. And we started sending folks overseas. And I thought one of the ways that I could help to heal that breaking heart was to be a part of the team, to join forces and to take action. And so I started going out and visiting the troops, and that's when I met General Franks. I was on the first big tour to Iraq in June of 2003. I've got some great pictures of us together on the tarmac at Baghdad Airport, standing there with the general who led the forces into Afghanistan and then led the forces into Iraq. And here I am standing with Tommy, and we became friends. And those events were galvanizing for me in just wanting to do more. Each time I did it, I wanted to do it again. And then I wanted to go here, and then I wanted to go there. And I ended up at Fort Stewart. I ended up at Walter Reed and Bethesda. I ended up overseas. I ended up there, this and that, back to the war zones over and over and over. And all that turned into the creation of my own Veteran and First Responder Support Foundation, the Gary Sinise Foundation.
Yes. So Colonel Hayes and General Franks still talk about that first USO tour that they had brought over. And was it June 2003? Is that when? May, June? So, yeah. And all of the amazing people that were a part of that. And so when you began, you served with the USO, and just like you were saying, you went on a tour, and it seemed to come, you became to more and more invested in providing something to the troops. And, all of the other programs came from all these USO tours. While you're there, you notice that, the Iraqi children are, they're so excited to be actually in a school building, but, they're having to share crayons and paper and pencils. And so that resonates into you starting the Operation Iraqi Children to make sure that they had all the supplies that they needed. And then it has to change into Operation International Children because you take it to other countries. And then all of these, like you just said, they manifest into your the Gary Sinise Foundation. And then with you, it just seems like it's just a little bit more and a little bit more. And then, I just need to do this and that. But what separates you and what we want to, show our young leaders is that you don't just speak it, you put it into action, and you put your plans into action, and you do. You're not just a man of words, you're a man of action. So can you tell us what you think, and that to us, that kind of separates great leaders from ordinary leaders. And so can you speak on that drive that you have and where that comes from?
Gosh, I don't, I wish I could. I don't know. I mean, I think at a young age, part of it, if I look back, to when I was a kid, as I said, I struggled academically. I was not a good student. I think I felt inadequate, as a student. So it made me feel a little bit intimidated when I was around kids that were really smart and, all of that. So I would I think I was, I would always try to make up for that by just trying to organize something or lead something or get something together or take action. I would be the kid in the neighborhood with all the neighborhood kids to organize the baseball game that we were going to play that Saturday morning or something. Make sure all the kids were there, everybody knew where to go. Or I would be the kid in the band. As I said, I had bands when I was a young guy who would get the band together, organize the rehearsal, to work on, what we were going to do. I would be the kind of leader of the band, right? Or on the football team, I was the quarterback and I would be the kind of the leader and stuff. I was a terrible student, couldn't do any of that, but I had this, I just had this, I was trying to make up for maybe some inadequacies or some feelings of insecurity or something by just going out and getting it, getting after it. Started a theater company when I got out of high school, and I became the artistic director of the theater company and had to make decisions and learn how to make decisions as a leader. And I remember the previous artistic director prior to me, he would kind of make the way he would do things is we had a company. There were 9 of us originally, and we'd all sit around and everybody would want to do something different. And somebody would have to kind of sort through the communal haze, of everybody chiming in. So it was sort of a community decision in those days. And when I took over the theater company, I wanted to tell people what to do. And I wanted to say, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. We're going to go here. We're going to do there. We got to get rid of that. We got to throw that out. You're fired, whatever. And it was a shock to the theater company, I must admit. It was a real shock to the theater company because nobody was used to doing that. We were all a bunch of young folks. We had our theater and, we'd do our play and then get a, 6-pack of beer afterwards and sit around and, the place would be a mess the next day and all that kind of stuff. And I came in, I remember I started giving our staff members, here's when you got to be at work and here's what you got to do. And if you're not going to do it, then get out and all that stuff. I just started learning how to be a leader of the theater company. We were raising money to try to do our plays. And I learned a lot about leadership and decision making. I think back in those Steppenwolf days when I was the artistic director of the company and the leader of the company. And so I developed this ability for whatever reason, just out of necessity and sort of, it wasn't necessarily that I was waiting for somebody to tell me what to do all the time. I just started to try to figure out what to do and then do it. And you don't always succeed, of course. You make several mistakes, as a young leader. You're going to make several mistakes and you're going to not make the right decision sometime. But what happens after that? You don't go in that territory again. It's just like, I've been there. I'm not going to do that. I stepped in it once. I'm not going to step in it again. And you learn from those, those things that don't work out so well. And I learned a lot about that. So as time went on, I just got more secure and more confident that I could make those decisions and we would see them through. And a lot of that, I needed to be sort of right? Not just tell people what to do and then sit back and hope they do it, but I would get on point a lot and go in first and try to make, try to lead by example. I wasn't going to do something or tell somebody to do something that I wasn't willing to do or had done before myself. And I learned a lot by doing that. by just taking action, by picking things up. So therefore, when September 11th comes along and all these different things, I had been through enough decision making and action taking that I knew, okay, if I set my mind to this or put my passionate boots on the ground, I was going to be able to, get something done to help somebody. And my mission then was to help our service members and to help our veterans and to make sure our active duty folks knew that they were appreciated. And it got really hairy in there, if you recall. So you got 2003, we deploy over there. Now we're in Iraq. Then the insurgency starts up, and then things are getting bad and things are getting difficult and the political environment is changing and then people aren't supporting it. And then there's division in the Congress about whether they should be supporting George Bush in Iraq or not. And people overseas that are serving are watching television over there and they're seeing nothing but bad news stories on the television all the time about how bad Iraq is going and how bad things are going all the time. Well, I had been over there and I had seen our service members go out to the Iraqi schools and try to help the kids. And, I saw little Iraqi children running up to those soldiers and just wrapping their arms around their legs and the soldiers are getting down and playing with them and bringing smiles and lifting these kids up. And they didn't have anything. They had absolutely nothing. No pencils, no paper, they were nothing. But our soldiers had rebuilt these particular schools that I went to see in 2003. And they were really proud of what they had done to help these Iraqi communities around. And this was in Balad, which is it's about 40 miles north of Baghdad. There was a big military base there called Camp Anaconda. And they took us out in convoys to visit these schools. And I saw this beauty. It was like our soldiers walking through German villages and handing out chocolate and to the children after we had bombed them, right? And now here our soldiers are rebuilding a school that Saddam Hussein had, he was terrorizing everybody. Well, I remember the headmaster of that school taking me into his little closet of an office, and he had made this plaque. And it was a thank you to the American service members for rebuilding their school. And he had it up and he was so proud of it. I have a picture of it somewhere. He was so proud to have that on his wall, thanking the American soldiers. And that day at that school was galvanizing. So I came home and said, well, how can I help reinforce that? How can I support that? So I went to my kids' school and said, we're going to pack up a bunch of supplies and put them in boxes, and I'm going to ship them to Camp Anaconda, and they're going to take them out and give them to the kids at the school. And that began the Operation Iraqi Children effort, where we started shipping hundreds of thousands of school supplies to Iraq and then Afghanistan and all these different places where our service members are deployed. And our motto for that effort, OIC, Operation Iraqi Children, Operation International Children, OIC, was helping soldiers help children. So I wanted to provide these supplies so that our soldiers could go into these villages and hand out this stuff to the kids and to the families and whatnot. And that would be a great hearts and minds effort to help show those people that our soldiers were there to help them, not hurt them.
Yeah. So with all you do, I know that, you've taken on, so much. So I know that, you're the name and the face of your organization, but tell me how important it is to surround yourself with a team that believes in the same mission that you do. And, how important is that team behind you?
Yeah, critically important. So I'm one guy. I made a decision at a certain point that years ago that, okay, I mean, if you read my book, you'll look at like the chapter leading up to the Gary Sinise Foundation chapter, right? And it's 2008, 9, 10. I launched in the foundation. We got it set up and running for the public in 2011. So if you look at those years, it was just, I was just ramping up like a maniac. I was going everywhere. I'm shooting a television series. I'm going overseas. I'm playing concert. I'm raising money, doing all these different things. It was a big, big effort. And I was volunteering for multiple organizations at that time that were in the military and first responder support space. And I was trying to help them raise money or raise awareness, try to, help all these organizations to do more themselves by lending my services to help them. It's all volunteer. I was getting, you get so much out of service. There's just nothing like it when you're serving others. You can, that's where true happiness comes from. There's no question about it. And even though I was dealing with a lot of difficult things, police officers getting shot and, paralyzed or whatever, building a house for them, or, little children that have lost their mom and dad in the war and military service, all these heartbreaking types of things, I could see what showing up meant, right? Showing up and wrapping your arms around somebody and letting them know you appreciate them, you love them, and you don't forget them can bring a lot of smiles. And so those smiles would just be the fuel and the energy to keep going. And I was doing that all over the place. And I was doing it for multiple organizations and the USO and the Disabled American Veterans, whatever, going here and there. It became very clear at a certain point that I was in this for good. This is something that gives life true meaning and purpose, to go out and help our defenders and help their families. So I made a decision to start the Gary Sinise Foundation. And because I wanted to do more. And I was one guy trying to make a living, trying to support my family, all that kind of stuff, trying to go here, go there, do everything. And I wanted to be able to create an organization to help me do more. So that I could build a full-time paid staff that could go out there in all these different spaces that are part of the Gary Sinise Foundation mission and do that on a daily basis. I'm a volunteer. This isn't what I get paid for. I get paid to act or, whatever. Even the music I don't get paid for. I've played 550 concerts for the troops. That's not for the money, it's for the mission. But in order to do more, you can depend on volunteers to a certain point. But then you're always subject to the volunteer saying, oh, I can't make it that day. I've got to take my kid to school, or I've got to go here. I got a dentist appointment, whatever, And I wanted to build an army of patriots who got me and would understand me and who would carry the Gary Sinise mission forward on a daily basis, 24/7. So raising money to build a nonprofit where I could actually take a portion of that money and expand that. And believe me, I'm the first donor. I didn't start something and ask people to do what I wasn't willing to do. I put a lot of my own resources into building the foundation. Again, leading by example. Don't ask somebody to do something you're not willing to do yourself. So I put a lot of personal money and time into the foundation. But I also wanted to build a team that could help me do more, get out there on a daily basis. It's their full-time job to call somebody up and tell them we're going to build a house for them, or to go start building that house, or to provide a vehicle for somebody, or to, take care of our Gold Star children, whatever it was. It's your full-time job to help people. And what a great full-time job. I mean, it's so heartwarming to know that we have the backing of the American people who see our mission at the Gary Sinise Foundation as worthy of their support. And then they send us their generous donations, whether it's $5 or $500 or $5,000 or whatever it is, everything all over the map. They're giving it to us because they trust the mission. They trust what we're trying to do. And they trust Gary Sinise, having seen me go all over the place doing all these things over the years. They trust that I will have a team that understands what that mission is, understands the way I want to do things, and that will go out there and wrap their arms around people just like I do. And that's what we do at the Gary Sinise Foundation. So we couldn't accomplish all the outreach that we're doing everywhere on multiple levels in the way that I envision doing it for many years to come without having a very dedicated full-time force to do it. And I've got a great team at the Gary Sinise Foundation.
So you've been compared to, with your USO involvement to the legendary Bob Hope. But I think what sets you apart is in our time and with these war, veterans and everything, with the, upgrades in medical and, technology and stuff like that, we have so many, veterans that are surviving that back in the time of Bob Hope that they just would not have survived, on the battlefield. So they're coming back, severely injured, where they do need help to, function on a daily basis. And so can you tell us how many homes you've built now for our soldiers that have come back severely injured?
Well, there's the homes that I was involved with in the beginning before I had a foundation. And those homes are the reason that when I started the Gary Sinise Foundation, we built a program to continue to do that. So the foundation has done, many, many of these homes, but we kind of chart the beginning from when I first raised money for the first quadruple amputee to survive that bombing in Iraq. His name's Brendan Morocco. He's from Staten Island. And I was approached by some folks there that I knew through the FDNY, the fire department there, because I had been involved in supporting them after September 11th. And they wanted to build this local soldier, the first quadruple amputee from Iraq. They wanted to build him a home. And I had raised money for other things in New York City. And they came to me and said, will you help us raise money? So I did a concert for Brendan Morocco in 2010 to raise money to build him a house. So that was the first one. Then there were, unfortunately, there were 4 other quadruple amputees. We ended up building homes for all of them. So if you go back to the beginning and you go just up to last week, where we gave away another home to a double amputee in Ohio, it's 85 homes at this point that I've been involved with and that the foundation has been involved with, going back to 2010.
That's amazing. So I was looking through your Facebook, your foundation's Facebook page last night, and 2 of the individuals that you've built homes for, my husband and I have a connection to. So, and just by knowing them, the relief and hope that those homes give individuals, it's just amazing. So, I mean, individuals that, when they come home and they're living in a small townhouse or a rent house that they can't change the width of a doorway, or, there's stairs that they can't get up to, that is a very depressing, and, it really sets a veteran, really back as to, their mental health is really put to test. So those homes that you're providing for those individuals it's just warms your heart to know that you have given them and their families that opportunity to live as normal as possible. So, and then there's individuals that you've helped, like Travis Mills, who have gone on and created his own foundation to, further the cause of helping soldiers. So it's just kind of a domino effect. The more you give, the hope is that the more individuals will give. So it's been over 20 years since that first visit on your first USO visit, and within that time, here recently, we've withdrawn all the troops from Afghanistan and Iraq. But that still doesn't mean that our troops and our first responders do not need the support. So with a nonprofit, it's difficult to keep that mission in the forefront. And so with those, with the war not being, an active part of our society now, how do you keep your mission relevant and, keep moving on day by day to still assist all these people that need assistance?
We're always going to need to support our defenders. It's just, are we at war or not? Well, not being at war does not stop the war from somebody who's been at war for multiple years and gone through all of that. They have multiple challenges that they're facing, and certainly we have multiple challenges facing, especially our Afghanistan veterans after what happened in Afghanistan and the way we got out of Afghanistan and the difficulties there and the not great decisions that were made to there. So we have a lot of people that are struggling with 20 years of war in Afghanistan and what was it all for, to just hand Afghanistan back to the Taliban and let them continue what they were doing before we got there. Not so good for our Afghanistan veterans, for sure. And so we're dealing with a lot of mental health issues, obviously, and we have multiple initiatives at the Gary Sinise Foundation to make sure that we try to touch people and to make sure that they know these services are available to them if they need them. We have a play that we're supporting called Last Out, Elegy of a Green Beret. That play was written by an Afghanistan veteran, Lieutenant Colonel retired Scott Mann, and he ended up writing a play. He wanted just to get these stories out, to tell these stories, to process what was going on with him. He was suicidal. He was dark things are happening. He's containing it. And so he ended up writing a play and performing this play for military audiences, veterans, military families, and taking this play around. Well, that is very similar to something that I was involved with back in the 80s that I write about in my book when I got involved with supporting Vietnam veterans. And I found a piece of material that was written by a group of Vietnam veterans, and we started performing it. And veterans would come from all over to see it. And then there would be the post-show discussions where somebody would just start expressing themselves based on what they had just seen on stage in front of them. And it opened these doors for healing. Well, the synergy between that experience back in the 80s with me and what Scott was doing with his current day conflict and the moral injury that has happened because of it was too great to pass up. So I offered to help Scott get the play around. So we've done it in Tampa, Florida. We've done it in Washington, D.C. We put it on stage at Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago, which is where I really started all my veterans work back in the 80s. It went to San Diego. It went to Phoenix. This month, in fact, this weekend, 2 days from now, it's in Franklin, Tennessee, which is the home base for the Gary Sinise Foundation. Now, I've moved the offices from Woodland Hills, California to Tennessee. And Last Out, Elegy of a Green Beret is being performed there. And then it goes to Milwaukee next month, and then it goes to Topeka, Kansas in October. And really, when veterans and military families come to see this play, it opens up a lot of doors. It's like you're unlocking something and allowing somebody to express something that they've been holding on. We don't want people to hold on to these feelings that they're having inside because of their service, or feeling like they weren't appreciated, or like, what was it all for? All that kind of stuff. We want them to heal. So we're reaching out wherever we can. We're doing multiple things in multiple spaces all over the place. That's just one of them. And you can go to GarySiniseFoundation.org to learn about that and many other initiatives to support our veterans and military families.
So, well, with that, I think our time's almost done, but I always like to ask our podcast guest, if you could give yourself, your 18-year-old self, a piece of advice, what would that be?
Follow your instincts. I mean, sometimes our instincts aren't so good. Sometimes we're misguided, but you learn from those. Again, as I've said, you learn from those missteps, and it strengthens you as a person. It strengthens you as a leader. And I would also say that, a key to true happiness, and we're all struggling to find our happiness, right? I mean, what is life about if it's not about trying to find that happy life that we all seek, and trying to pass that happy life on to our kids so that they have a happy life? And finding true happiness is something that we all desire, we all want. We're lucky to live in a country that provides us the freedom to, pursue our happiness. I'm blessed that I can take my success and pass it on to others by trying to do something with it. Service is a great healer, and it is a great source of allowing one to feel true happiness in helping somebody else. And I've found that, look, my family has been through all kinds of difficult things. Just like every family, we all go through tough stuff, some more than others, And some of the things that I've experienced with people that we're serving, it's humbling, and it's kind of mind-boggling how somebody can just get through that terrible situation that they have found themselves in. How do they get through? And I found that with many of them, that's exactly right. Taking their pain and channeling it into positivity for somebody else. And that can really, I've tried to pass that on to my kids. If you're feeling a little bit sorry for yourself, you feel like you're overwhelmed with too many things and stuff like that, just bring a smile to somebody's face and it'll bring one to yours. It really is healing. And I would encourage anyone, young person, to pursue their dreams. We live in a great country. Pursue your passion, but do it. Make sure that it's giving you joy. There's a line in my book: when joy connects to mission, of life of purpose begins to take shape. And I've felt great purpose and great joy in serving others.
Thank you again to REI Oklahoma for making this podcast possible. For nearly 40 years, the board, staff, patrons, and supporters of the nonprofit economic development REI Oklahoma have been committed to expanding Oklahoma's economic prosperity, earning the reputation of being one of the most comprehensive economic development organizations in the country. Business lines, training workshops, business consulting, and networking opportunities, as well as technical assistance and even commercial business space, are made available to Oklahoma entrepreneurs and small businesses. For low and moderate income individuals and families, down payment and or closing cost assistance is offered. Learn more at reiok.org. On behalf of the 4-Star Leadership with General Tommy Franks team, I'm your host, Dr. Jill Green, and this has been the Core Principles of Leadership with General Tommy Franks podcast. Now it's your turn, podcast listeners. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what you think of this episode and all our other episodes. Share this podcast with all the leaders and up-and-coming leaders in your circles. Be sure to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast listening platform, and don't forget to mark your calendars the last Friday of each month for another inspiring episode. So for now, as General Franks always says, go be feisty.